All right, so before we get too far into the course, let's start by going over the basic settings of a brush. Brush is our most important and fundamental tool when it comes to digital painting, so we're going to need to know how it works. There's three main controls that we're going to need to use to manipulate our brush. Some software might only have two, but a lot of them will have three. So the three settings are size, flow, and opacity. So the first one we're going to start with is size. So size is pretty self-explanatory. If we come up here to our settings, we can see that by sliding this, it'll make the size of our brush bigger or smaller. And you also have the option to enter it by hand, by manually, up to the very pixel. We're not really going to worry about that in this course. We're just going to use this slider here. So you can see if we slide the slider down, we'll have a small brush. And if we bring the slider up, we'll have a much bigger brush. Now, there might be some scenarios where you have a brush like this one, for example, that can kind of change its own size and thickness depending on how hard or soft you push. But we're still going to want to work manually sometimes to change that size because we might need to get some really small details, and even pressing really lightly, we're not going to have as much control. So be sure to take advantage of your size slider there. Let's go ahead and close this menu now, and we can come up here to opacity, which is the next one. So opacity is going to control how opaque our paint is. So right now it's at 100%, it completely covers everything up, but if we drop this down to say 72%, and we'll pick a different color here, you can see that when we paint, it doesn't completely cover up what's underneath. We can still see some of it coming through. And as long as we kind of leave it like that, we can go over what we've painted earlier in that same stroke. So I haven't lifted up my brush yet, and it won't get any darker than that. But if I pick up and go down again, now it will start a new layer of paint on top of that, and it will keep darkening it up more. So we have it really low, it'll barely show up, and it won't overlap at all until we pick up our brush again like that. And then if we have it really high, it's going to be a lot more opaque. Most of the time you'll probably be painting at full opacity, but there are some scenarios where you might want it lowered, or, for me personally, I oftentimes just lower the opacity of the layer than my brush, but that will become personal preference, and we'll go over that in different painting techniques later in the course. The last setting is flow. This one might not be in all software. It's not in Procreate, which is what I like to use, but it's nice, it helps out a lot, but it's not necessary. You can still create great art without it. So if your software doesn't have this, don't freak out. But if it does, let's just go over it just to be clear. So flow at 100% is just going to be nice and opaque. But when we bring flow down, what it's going to control is how much paint is coming out of our brush when we put it to the canvas or to our tablet. So for example, think of it like a spray paint can. When you have a spray paint can, and if you have the flow down, only a little bit of paint's going to be coming out at a time. The paint is still opaque. It's not transparent. There's just not that much of it. So you can see over here, we have the flow turned way, way down. And unlike opacity, when we go back over our stroke from before, it'll start to build up layers because it's like a spray paint can. The more we go over the same spot over and over again, the more it's going to continue to build up paint. And different brushes are going to react differently with this. So for example, if I come over here and do the soft round brush with the flow way down, you're going to have to go over it a lot more to really darken it up. And let me bring up my brush size. I'll make it a little bit easier to see, I think. I'll pick a green color over here. So this is me pushing down as hard as I can with the flow at 4%. But as I go over it again and again and again without picking up my brush, it's going to get darker and darker and darker. And you can see as we go over these other parts, it's not necessarily transparent. It's not like the opacity, right? It's just simply not as much paint coming out. It's a little bit difficult concept to grasp. What I would recommend is kind of messing around with it, exploring. You'll get the hang of it. But like I said, not all software even has it. It's not 100% necessary. You can get a similar effect just by pushing lightly with your brush a lot of times. But that's going to be it for our main basic brush control. So hopefully you have a good grasp on it. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one.